This is step 3 from 7 Steps to Heaven, which you can find at learnjazzstandards.com, a website put together by Camden Hughes. And if you watch the first 2 videos, those are really prerequisites, particularly step 2, before you go into step 3. If you're watching this video somewhere other than the learnjazzstandards.com website, then step 3 states play through the tune using short repeated rhythmic patterns or riffs and note groupings, which are non-repetitive patterns of 3 to 7 notes. So you really have to have the chord progression down and the melody, the form of the tune under your fingers before you can kind of do this. And the riff idea, which kind of comes out of Kansas City, the head arrangements of Count Basie for one. In fact, if you take 1 O'Clock Jump, one of the riffs that they use, there's 4 or 5 of them in that particular arrangement, they would do these head arrangements where they didn't need to write them out, and they would just remember what the riffs were, call them out by number. There was one of the riffs was ba da 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 be da 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 be da 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 ba da da da. Just simple little idea. So if you took All the Things You Are, which is the song we're using in all these video demonstrations, taking it through the entire form of the tune. So it's more of a practice technique in this case than an actual performance technique, because that would get a little monotonous using the same thing all the way through. But it's forcing you to focus in on one particular element, in this case a rhythmic element. And they could be simpler riffs than that. But if I continue with that idea of the one I just did, if you want to hear it in context of a play along,
1, 2,
here's the chord
1,
changes.
2, 3, 4.
Taking a simpler idea, better to start simpler maybe. You do 8 quarter 8, like who dot dot, who dot dot, who dot dot. So an idea of how to kind of go through that. Taking a specific idea, keeping it short and simple really is the best way to start out. I find sometimes with students they'll try to make these long, elaborate type of riffs, and even the Count Basie one would be a little bit more advanced one. You might want to start with something as simple as 8th quarter 8th, or quarter note and 2/8 notes, D do dot, D do dot, D do dot. So something like that. But really trying to keep, I find with students sometimes, is keeping them on task. No, you're straying away from the idea. Make sure you keep the idea intact all the way through. It's really a discipline more than anything else, especially with the riff idea, which is a very specific rhythmic idea that you could write the rhythm out. You could write several different specific rhythms out on a note paper someplace, music paper, and just play through those all the way through. Give yourself half a dozen different ones, and it's really just your imagination that would be the only thing to limit you as to how many different types of rhythmic ideas you could come up with. Now the second half of step 3 is a little bit more open-ended. The note groupings idea really I got from a Jerry Bergonzi series that was published on Advanced Music. I think there's about 4 books, and they all come with accompanying CDs. And the note grouping idea is more where you're thinking in groups of, and in step 3 I mentioned 3 to 7 notes. The shorter ones actually work a little bit better, 3, 5s, 2s, 4s, something like that. So to kind of demonstrate that, usually in a clinic I'll have a rhythm section playing in the background, and these are not specific rhythms, so your rhythms are changing constantly. You're just trying to avoid getting away from what becomes a trap, I think, a lot of times, particularly in swing, where you have this steady 8th note flow. Young players, sometimes you'll hear this a little too much.
1, 2, 3, 4.
There's a lot of 8th note motion, kind of a yada yada kind of factor, whereas it's yada 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 yada. And we'll even talk in some later steps where you purposely will want to do that, try to play with a lot of density without any space. But the swing the swing feel usually tends to get you playing a lot of eighth notes, kind of legato eighth notes that are grouped together. So to break away from that kind of stasis, doing these note groupings, I do it at first just by saying 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So then how this would sound:
1, 2, 3, 4.
You can hear how that would vary with if you a break away from the eighth note. Here's the eighth note idea. Here's fives, for instance. So I tried to mix it up a little bit at the end, where I went back and forth between the standard eighth note feel and I was working on little groups of 5. And that's actually something that you could use more in performance. Using the riff idea, that can get a little monotonous if you take one idea and just kind of keep running it through the entire form. But the note groupings can kind of be integrated and folded into the eighth note idea. And I think you could probably do the same thing with the riffs. Riffs are more specific rhythmic note groupings that you're repeating. And maybe you could shift them a little bit across the bar line and so forth and compress them and expand them. But I like the note grouping idea because it's a little bit more open, and again, you really can't, I found with students, they really can't start to do this particular step until they've done step 2. And they can play through the chord progressions, outlining. Doing that all the way through the form, and that's demonstrated in step 2. And also know what the melody is. You have to have all of that really memorized and subconscious under your fingers before you can start to think. Thinking 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3s, 5s, 7s. The longer ones sometimes can get a little harder to contain. But that's the basic idea behind step 3, is really taking rhythmic language, taking specifically riffs or taking note groupings, and running them through the form of the particular tune you're working on, making sure that you've already taken care of step 1 and 2.